They would drink and have sex till they became euphoric, which is the initial sense of being outside of the body, and then eventually become one with the God, which is called ecstasy. That's how they explained their orgies. I'm like, all right, you know. So now this begs the question, they are all saying that we have souls and spirits that are leaving our body, and I'm like, okay, what is a soul? What's a spirit? Now I need to know what they're talking about. So I went to the dictionary and I looked at it. It said the principle of life, feeling, thought, and action in man regarded as a distinct entity separate from the body. We were talking about, it will come to that in a minute. So they think that it is an entity that's not physical. This is what they believed, I'm sure for centuries. And spirit, it's the principle of conscious life, the vital principle in man animating the body or mediating between body and soul. I'm like, wow. I have done 13 years of medical education. Not once the word soul or spirit were used in my anatomy or physiology textbooks. I can't find them. But billions of people believe in them. So spirit, soul, out-of-body experience, and near-death experiences, are these truly supernatural, or they are all just in our head, or to be more precise, in our brains? I can understand how people from many centuries ago could believe in that. But with 21st century knowledge, with the ability to disseminate, I am hoping that that belief is going to go down. Descartes, as recent as a few centuries ago, believed that there is this so-called non-physical entity in our brains that goes around telling us and what to do or experience and making us feel the thoughts. So this is how the idea of physical and non-physical or spiritual dualism came into existence, you know. And of course, by the way, Rigveda also had that, you know, which is close to 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. But in 21st century, I'm happy to say that there's so much research and evidence that suggests that they are not supernatural. In fact, the out-of-body experience, it results from a deficient multisensory integration at the temporoparietal junction on the right side. Well, let me just decipher that a little bit. We have the right side of the brain. We have temporal lobe, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, and there's a junction there called temporoparietal junction. And I'll come to that in a minute. When all these sensory inputs that are going into that area, if they're not working together, you have this out-of-body experience. So that's the location of the temporoparietal junction. And this is a paper where surgeons were doing awake brain surgery. And it is done sometimes when they're trying to remove a seizure focus, but close to eloquent areas like motor areas, speech areas. You don't want to damage any of them, so you give initially just enough sedation to make the incision with local anesthetic and open the skull, and when we're on the brain, you wake them up. And when you're touching the brain, they don't experience any pain because brain itself does not have pain receptors. So if you're next to the speech area, you're asking him to count 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you stimulate the speech area, he stops saying or speaking. And you ask him to start moving the fingers, and if you stimulate the motor area, there's disturbance of that. That's how we know where we are at. So as they were doing this, when they stimulated the temporoparietal junction, particularly in an area called angular supramarginal gyrus junction and the superior temporal gyrus, activation was noted to the right. There are also other areas. There was consistent experience of out-of-body experience by the patient. So here they are, putting an electrode, sending some electrical impulse, and boom, he's having an out-of-body experience. So by will, you could make the soul go in and out of the body. Not really, but this is what the person experiences, like he is out of his body, because there is disruption of all this sensory output by this electrical stimulation. So I did come prepared. So that's the area called TP junction, and that's where, when you stimulate that area, that's when you experience this out-of-body experience. And that's the angular gyrus, supramarginal gyrus, and supramarginal. So this is the area on the right side. And they actually did some PET scans to see the activity. So there is no incorporeal spirit or soul. It is a subjective experience due to disruption of our perception of our relationship to the three-dimensional space we are in. That's what is out-of-body experience. Near-death experience due to effects of oxygen deprivation. And similar to REM sleep, which is when we are in deep sleep, we have a stage called rapid eye movement sleep, during which time we dream. They experience some of these experiences. Like, I had unbelievable amount of, at times, dreams where I felt like I'm flying, and finding a bunch of money only to wake up the next morning and say, wait a minute, it was just a dream. But it happens during the REM sleep because of, again, the same thing is happening during REM sleep. So if they have prefrontal cortex that is slowed down, you can have this sense of calm, indifference, no pain, sense of peace. Parietal cortex, which is the right side, loss of spatial orientation, as I said, one with the universe and out-of-body experience, and white light and a tunnel vision, maybe because of the way the oxygen supply is to the retina. You have more supply to the center than to the periphery. So if there is a problem, the periphery tends to have problems sooner than the center, so you just may see like a tunnel vision. And if you have deprivation of oxygen to the part of the brain called hippocampus, you have loss of memory. So, but all these are because of dysfunction of different parts of the brain, which give us perceptions that are then said to be experiences where they felt like they went out of the body, but they tend to derive from that experience the idea of existence of soul and spirit. One of the best books that has unbelievable compilation of knowledge in the entire English language about near-death experience, written by Orley, who is an anesthesiologist. So all these things not only happen in what we said, they happen in dreams, drugs, dance, trance, disease, dissociative anesthesia. Some people experience it when anesthesia, the medication, is preventing them from experiencing pain, but sometimes they become conscious. And they start feeling like I'm experiencing everything around me. I felt like I'm looking at myself. All this can happen when there is dissociative anesthesia. And of course, we said near-death experience. So what is the current state of the union of soul, spirit, OB, out-of-body experience, ND, and God? And why is it the way it is? And I think it's because of three things. Problem of knowledge, problem of language, and problem of human condition. So if you take spirit, the principle of conscious life, the vital principle in man animating the body or mediating between body and soul, which I think was defined at a time when they had no clue about what body is all about and how it worked. So it's a problem of knowledge. So if you take out-of-body experience and said it's that animating principle, that was the time before DNA was discovered. They looked at the body and they felt like there must be something inside that's leaving me when I die or when I have these experiences. And also it is that animating principle. But what's the animating principle? Where is it? Is it in my brain? Is it in my heart? The Egyptians thought it was in the heart. So when they had to mummify, they could care less about the brain. Man, it hurts me every time I hear that. They would take a pick, put through the nose, and drain the brain out because they could care less about the brain. I'm like, brain! Because they had no understanding. And they thought the animating principle or the seat of our soul was the heart. But now, can we pinpoint to one organ system and say this is the seat of this life? No. Why? Each organ is made up of hundreds and thousands of cells, and each cell has life. But what is it that in each cell that has life? Well, we know it's DNA. So, is the principle of life in DNA of each cell in billions of cells? It is the accumulation of all these atoms, which when come together as organs, and organ systems coming together as a body. There's no single principle that goes around. It's the entire thing, and the sum is more than all the individual parts. And this is what Epicurus, believe it or not, 2,300 years ago said. My favorite, one of my favorite. He said, when particularly fine atoms come together and work harmoniously, we call it life. When they disrupt, we call it death. When life exists, death doesn't. When death exists, life doesn't. And he said, so there's no entity called Vivek that goes to hell to whom bad things happen. So there's no afterlife. This is the only life, and the goal and meaning of life has to be pursuit of happiness and moderation. 2,300 years ago he said that. So he realized that there's no single entity, you know. Soul is the same thing. The principle of life, feeling, and thought and action in man, because they had no understanding of how brain works. It's because of all these aspects of the brain put together, we have the experience of consciousness, perceptions of all kinds. But they had no knowledge. So the initial one was the problem of knowledge. Then it's the problem of language. Epicurus is my favorite philosopher. But one of the philosophy that I have really taken a lot of interest into is Ludwig Wittgenstein's linguistic philosophy. He wrote a book. He's from Austria. He was from Austria, contemporary of, and might have been also a student of Bertrand Russell. So he wrote a book about language. And he said, in our brains, every picture is represented as a word. So it's called picture theory. And he thought that the words had concrete meaning. Then he thought about this, and I said, no, I messed up. We don't have concrete definition or meaning for words. The meaning of a word depends on the context in which it's used and the emotion with which it's used. And he said that the same word will not have the same meaning in a different time in your life. So for example, if you take love to me when I was a teenager with my hormones raging was different than what it is now, you know. Motherly love is different. Fatherly love is different. Brotherly love is different. Erotic love is different. Why? Because the words are trying to express some other things that are happening in our brains. And what we experience at one time may not be the same the next day or the next year. So the meaning we have for the same word may be different.